Hi, I'm Howard Marks, and this is How to Think About Risk. Now, moving on a little bit to talk about the character of risk, I think it's interesting to note that risk is counterintuitive. They did an experiment in the town of Drachten, Holland. They took away all the traffic lights, traffic signs, and road markings. What do you think happened to the level of accidents and fatalities? It went down. How could it possibly have gone down when all the road aids were gone? And the answer is people said, oh, there are no more traffic signs, traffic lights, or road markings. I'd better drive more carefully. On the other hand, Jill Fredson is an expert on avalanches. And she said that better gear is created every year, which makes it easier and more feasible to climb. And yet, the risk, the number of fatalities and accidents in climbing doesn't go down. How can that be? Obviously, counterintuitive. People see that better gear is being invented, and they say, well, since we have better gear, we can do riskier things. And the level of accidents and fatalities is maintained even in spite of the arrival of better gear. So if you think about those two examples, you realize that the risk of an activity doesn't just lie in the activity in itself, but importantly, in how the participants approach it. The degree of risk present in a market or in an investment doesn't come just from the market or the investment, but how people participate in that investment. And if they conclude that the market has become safer, they may say that that frees them to do riskier things. And that's why I believe that risk is low when investors behave prudently and high when they don't. Just as risk is counterintuitive, I believe that risk is perverse. As I said, the riskiest thing in the world is the belief that there's no risk. A high level of risk consciousness, on the other hand, tends to mitigate risk. So when people say, well, that's really risky, if they take a cautious approach, then it becomes safe. As an asset declines in price, most people say, oh, it's risky, look how it's falling. But with the lower price, it actually becomes less risky. As an asset appreciates, most people say, that's a great asset, look how well it's doing. But the rising price makes it riskier. So again, perverse. And this perversity is one of the main things that render most people incapable of understanding risk. I think it's important to grasp a concept. Risk is hidden, and risk is deceptive. Loss is what happens when risk, the potential for loss, collides with negative events. You know, Buffett says everything the greatest, and he said that it's only when the tide goes out that we find out who's been swimming naked. It's only in times of testing that investors and their strategies are examined for the risk they really held. An example of that I wrote in my book, The Most Important Thing. Those of us who live in California, as I did at the time, our houses might contain a construction flaw. But if all is well, that flaw sits there for year after year and doesn't produce any loss. It's only when the earthquakes occur that the house is tested and the flaws are disclosed and the risk, the potential for loss, turns into actual loss. So similarly, an investment can be risky, but if it only exists in salutary environments, it may look like a winner for a long time, and it may look safe for a long time. The fact that an investment is susceptible to a risk that occurs extremely rarely, what I call an improbable disaster, what Nassim Nicholas Taleb called the black swan in his excellent book, the infrequency of loss can make it appear that the investment is safer than it really is. And of course, that's an entirely risky conclusion. So the infrequency with which risk turns into loss can be deceptive and cause people to underrate the risk involved in an activity.